So I'm going to show you in this video how Lucifer is controlling our weather, why he's controlling our weather and these end times, and who he's using to do it, and how he's doing it, the technology behind it, step by step. Here we go. The climate change hoax. Why is it a hoax? Why is the Vatican behind it? Why is George Soros working with the Vatican? Why is the United Nations asking for $90 trillion to fix climate change? And why are the Democrats in the United States pushing for that same agenda? It started with Nikola Tesla, and I learned about him about 8 years ago. Nikola Tesla is a scientist who disappeared out of history. Suddenly he was written out of the history books. He came up with something called HAARP. And HAARP is the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. You probably heard about that. Up in Alaska is where it started. And it was funded by a guy named Rockefeller, a rich and powerful man. The Rockefellers kind of own the HAARP patents at this point, but they do it under the guise of some other companies. But the United States patent method and apparatus for altering a region of the Earth's atmosphere, ionosphere, and/or magnetosphere. I'm going to have a few quotes from the Rockefeller family later about this technology and its misuse. So here we go. HAARP is pretty much a huge electromagnetic microwave oven. And HAARP was developed over 100 years ago, primarily for submarine communications. You could shoot HAARP into the air, and it could bounce off the ionosphere, which is the layer between outer space and the Earth. It would bounce off with something called ELF waves, which are real low-frequency waves. You could penetrate the ocean, and you could actually talk to a submarine thousands of miles away. But of course, there were some side effects with shooting these waves into our oceans, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. Whales used navigation, of course, so do dolphins. And what happens to them when they're shot with microwaves or ELF waves from the HAARP machine? So the frequency of the electromagnetic field of the planet Earth is changing. Let's figure out why that is and what's happening. It's always been concentrated at 7.83 hertz. But in June of 2014, scientists have noticed a major change. Schumann resonance occur because the space between the surface of the Earth and the conductive ionosphere acts as a closed waveguide. It's been at a certain dimension and size since the beginning of time. The limited dimensions of the Earth cause the waveguide to act as a resonant cavity for electromagnetic waves in the ELF band. So something has changed between the Earth and the ionosphere. This cavity is naturally excited by electric currents such as lightning. The Earth's ionosphere is supposed to protect the Earth from things like meteors and solar flares. Suddenly we have a lot of meteors that are flying through our atmosphere. Why is that? The shield has been damaged by the use of HAARP by numerous countries in the last 10 or 20 years. Our ionosphere is disappearing. I'll show you why that's happening in a second. HAARP is also used as a missile deterrent. What happens is a country shoots off a missile, flies through the stratosphere, goes into the ionosphere, and we turn on our microwaves, our HAARP machines, and HAARP is directed through the ozone layer, punches a hole in the ozone, goes into the ionosphere, superheats it, super hot, and blows the ionosphere out into space. Once the ionosphere is gone, it cannot be replaced. The missile also gets blown out into space, which is a good thing. But the repercussion is that our ionosphere is disappearing, and it is irreplaceable. The Earth's ozone layer also gets holes in it, which allows the ultraviolet sunlight to pass through and pretty much cook anything that's underneath it. That can be repaired, but it takes a long time to do. You are also an electromagnetic battery. All human beings, like the planet Earth, are affected by HAARP and by this radiation we're putting out. We are a balanced electromagnetic marvel of God's creation. Tampering with that is not a good thing. The human brain and heart both send out electromagnetic frequencies which help control our bodies. If there are waves other than those coming from and emanating from our own heart and mind, what effect will that have upon human beings? Well, Tesla experimented with this. Bees use navigation. They use the electromagnetic field to find out where they are, to find out where their food is. Well, bees are dying off in mass numbers because of HAARP. Whales and dolphins, as I mentioned before, also use their own fields, which are no longer usable. So HAARP can be used to neutralize an electromagnetic field. It can end life. And what Tesla did was he aimed this at animals out in the desert, such as rabbits, little bunny rabbits. And he found that he could neutralize the electromagnetic field that was in the bunny, coming out of the bunny's brain and the bunny's heart, and he could actually turn off their brains, which caused them to die instantly. You don't have brain waves, you cannot operate. This is a horror. I mean, this is something that few people know about, but it is an absolute horror if this got out. So we have a lot of devastating natural disasters that are happening around the world, and dolphins are being cooked in the water. How is this happening? How are animals being cooked? Here's a dolphin that was pulled out of the ocean near Iran. Scientists were looking at it. How on earth is this thing cooked alive? Whales are beaching themselves everywhere in the world, dying in vast numbers, and they're relating this to HAARP. HAARP blasts a hole through and into the ionosphere and can actually change the weather. We currently have 350 permanent weather control sites in the United States. Other countries have these control sites as well. So David Rockefeller, who was a globalist, said about Tesla's HAARP technology way back in 1917 when he was funding this. Certainly messing with the electrojet or our sky has the potential for causing unpredictable events, perhaps making magnetic poles change position, or the collapse or reversal of the magnetic field. Any such event could be catastrophic to life on Earth. Even if some madman does not use HAARP to destroy the Earth, could a fundamentalist Christian want to use HAARP to do just enough damage to force God's hand? Well, that's not what Christians do, but that is in fact what Luciferians do. They are supposed to be the left hand of God, forcing God's hand in creation and changing creation for the better. The bringers of light. So the question is, has the pole shifted? And yes, indeed, we have heard from scientists recently that the pole is shifting towards Siberia, which is causing weather pattern changes, for example, in the United States, the polar vortex. It's causing floods all over the world. It's causing havoc for everybody. John F. Kennedy, in the attached speech, speaks about weather control in the United States back in the 1960s.
Ladies and gentlemen, we shall propose further cooperative efforts between all the nations in weather prediction and eventually in weather control. We shall propose, finally, a global systems of communication satellites linking the whole world in telegraph and telephone and radio and television. The day need not be far away when such a system will televise the proceedings of this body to every corner of the world for the benefit of peace.
You just get on to Mr.
Yes,
Fletcher.
sir.
Another question on the in an interview with the Los Angeles Times on April 21st, you said that you told the Associated Press that the American government has created weather tampering techniques so that the New World Order will be able to starve millions of Americans and to control the rest. Would you explain what you were trying to say?
Well, what I was trying to say is exactly what I said. There is weather control techniques. We have a complete package on that, which I did not bring, but I certainly will see to it that it is brought in for the record. Number one, the entire patents on the equipment. Number two, Senator Claiborne Pell's complete statement and story of his own that not only does it exist, but that we even utilize it as far back as the Vietnam War. You might want to touch base with Senator Pell.
I just want to repeat before I turn to
So yes,
yes,
but we do have all that information.
You're saying the government has created weather tampering techniques so that the, quote, New World Order will be able to starve millions of Americans.
Worldwide.
Millions of Americans, and to control the rest.
Yes, sir, and that's my belief. As bizarre as that sounds, when if somebody had told me that that equipment even existed 10 years ago, I would have thought they were nuts, sir.
So let's take a look at the United Nations and their role in climate change. Lucis Trust, the spiritual foundation of the United Nations. The Rockefellers and the Rothschilds make a deal. Rockefeller supplied the land for the United Nations, and Rothschild built it with his $20 trillion. So these guys got together way back in 1900 and established HARP, and Rothschild bought up ABC, NBC, CBS, he bought up Reuters. He has control over all of our media at this point. These guys got together way back over 100 years ago, and they've been pretty much controlling what's been going on with the Democrat Party, especially with the high rise of communism in Russia, with the creation or recreation of Israel, and the United Nations. They pretty much control the oil industry and pretty much all the money in banking all over the world. They are the central bank. The ones who funded Lenin and Trotsky, tried to bribe Abraham Lincoln, tried to bribe Kennedy, and at our odds right now with Donald Trump. Now the United Nations is being supported by the Pope, and the Pope is working with George Soros on climate change. And so the United Nations, of course, is pushing a climate action agenda. They want to have $90 trillion donated from the United States, one way or another, to fight climate change, which is being caused by HARP. And so you've got people like Greta here who are working very hard, bipolar girl who's working to push climate change upon everybody, and a feeling of guilt. So Lucis Trust, originally called Lucifer Publishing and the United Nations, there's an obelisk and a room in the center of the United Nations that was built by Lucis Trust. The Lucis Trust Foundation at the heart of the United Nations was one called the Lucifer Trust. For a brief period of about 2 or 3 years in the early 1920s, when Allison Foster Bailey were beginning to publish their books published under her name, they named their fledgling publishing company Lucifer Publishing Company, Lucifer being the bringer of light to their world. And they funded this room, a meditation room in the center of the UN. By 1925, the name was changed to Lucis Publishing Company and has remained so ever since. Both Lucifer and Lucis come from the same word root, Lucis being the Latin generative case meaning of light. We can only surmise that they, like their teacher, H.P. Blavatsky, for whom they had enormous respect, sought to elicit a deeper understanding of the sacrifice made by Lucifer. Hitler was also a follower of H.P. Blavatsky. Rockefeller approved Lucifer's monolith at the core of the UN. There were protests against this, of course, and that's why the name was really changed. Here's a photo of Blavatsky, here's a photo of Bailey, one of her disciples. And here, in fact, is the United Nations meditation room, a room of quiet. Here's our Pope, who is supporting the United Nations and looking for a one world government and a one world leader he's called upon now. And this was their hopeful leader a couple years ago. Unfortunately, she did not measure up and was beaten by Donald Trump.